Alright, welcome back everyone, and welcome to another video. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded, but I was just kind of chilling on the holidays, really. Next time I'll probably just like save up a bunch of videos and do it then. But here we are today with a tier list video for the Halo Wars Leader Overhaul mod. This is going over every leader. Now there's not that many leaders to choose. Like there's not that many leaders. There's only 10, unlike Halo Wars 2 where there's like 16 and stuff. So to make it a little bit more interesting for me, I'm gonna be forced. The challenge is going to be for like I have to basically put only 2 characters in each tier. Otherwise, like because I can see a lot of characters being very close to each other, sort of deal. Like I would probably put a lot of people in A because they're really close. But this video is not about that. This video, I have to place people where I believe they belong. Each tier can only have 2 people, so this is how it is. So this is gonna be quite challenging because like I said, they're really a lot of them are really close. At the very bottom, none of them are bad. No, I'll just say that right now. None of the leaders are bad, even in D tiers. D tier is a situational. That's all I have to really say about that. D tier is the situational. That's about all that is. As you can see, the top tier here, we just have like all the UNSC leaders. The second category, like right here, is all the Covenant leaders, and then here is all like the utility leaders. Well, not the utility leaders. The I don't know. I said utility. The other like various factions that are not part of UNSC or Covenant. They're just sort of their own thing. Like the Grunt Rebellion, Flood, Heretics, Rebels. So yeah, this is how it is. But yeah, two people must be in each faction. I have to dissect and just really think deep for each leader and figure out where they specifically belong. It's gonna be quite challenging for sure. So we'll start at D tier and work our way up, I think. Or should I go the other way around? I think for no, we'll go. I think it'll be more difficult to start. I think it'll be less difficult to start downward and go upward because it's still gonna be pretty difficult. So, all right. So situational, right? If I'm gonna go with anyone, I'm gonna have to say Grunt Rebellion. Grunt Rebellion has to be the first one I could come to mind when it comes to situational. They are not bad. Like I said, none of these leaders are bad. But when it comes to the Grunt Rebellion, I feel like they are probably ultimately the. I'll even put it like this. So like, so if they're to the right, they're even worse than the person to the left. So we'll see the worst to the best, basically. I think the Grunt Rebellion is the worst leader in the game, and it's only because they are very lacking in. I guess you could say they're very lacking in overall firepower. Like they can't really stand up against the Flood, for instance, the Rebels, Cutter, and between Forge and the Rebels, like grunts do have very powerful weapons against vehicles, but it's almost not enough. Their turrets, like I said, Grunt Rebellion is really strong late game if they can get like a huge fort up with like people in towers everywhere and turrets everywhere. But it costs a lot to do that. The Grunt Horde, like where they have like a bunch of Grunt minions, they don't cost much and they're just able to tank a bit, buy you time. They're very cheap, but even they are very questionable because of the fact that anti-infantry for a lot of these leaders is very strong. Like you got Cutter, He's like, he's always been the infantry guy. He's just really strong for infantry. You have the rebels that are really strong for infantry. The flood take them over. The heretics are very powerful, and all the tank leaders, which are rebels and forge, and well, I wouldn't say really brute chieftain. He's more the like a counter to them. But even Anders, which has very powerful air, and Prophet, which has very powerful, his chair, his his leader is also very powerful. Grunt Rebellion really does falls on its face because of that. I feel like they had the weakest. They had the weakest leader for sure. Their leaders, they can have three leaders, but they like even with all three of them, they really can't kill anyone. Uh, they're more like a support class leader, and they're more of a build up like bombs and stuff like that. Like I said, Grunt Rebellion can be very powerful in late game, especially if worked with like I think the best ally they can have is the Flood, mainly because they can both just place a bunch of turrets everywhere at that point, and they just become the Super Turtle gods. But if they're not working with anyone and they're just by themselves, Grunt Rebellion has a very weak early game. They have a very weak mid game. Like they're only online late game, so that's why ultimately I think the Grunt Rebellion would have to go at the very bottom of the list. Still very good, but if this tier list was about super turtling alone, they'd be up here for sure. But other than that, though, other than super turtling, they're down here. So, all right, next leader. Next leader we would have to put down at the very bottom of the list. I would have to say, if anyone, I don't think any of these three. I don't think Arbiter. I don't really think Prophet. I don't think Chieftain. I would almost have to say, hmm. I would have to say actually, probably Cutter. Do I put Cutter that low? I think I do. Yeah, I'm going to put Cutter this low. He's better than Grunt Rebellion, I think. But the reason being, Cutter very much suffers. Uh, in terms like he has great infantry. He's got great infantry, but I feel like between Arbiter's missile launcher guys, which just blow up everything, Prophet's energy sword and Goliaths that are very powerful against infantry and just tanks and stuff. Anders with her Hawks just counters the ODSTs because she could just cryo bomb them as well, and she also has rhinos which prevent them from getting even close to her. So she's very powerful. You got Forge that has powerful tanks. You got Rebels that have powerful infantry and tanks. Heretics are just OP in general. Flood can take him. I had to say Cutter. Like I don't think he goes up above anyone else because yes, he does have powerful Falcons and he does have well, I mean, heck, the Falcons are not even that. They're very tanky. But the big problem with the Falcons is that the fact that when you build a force of them, they can't all attack at once because they're so their hitbox is kind of like spread out very widely, so they can't like all group up and attack the same target. Really, not effectively at least. They're very tanky, but that's about all they really are. They're not. Their damage is very iffy. Um, so I don't think Cutter can beat anyone realistically. Like I said, he's still good for sure. You can still do a lot with him, but in reality, facing any of these guys, I don't see it. I don't see him really being better than any of these guys, just because of how powerful these other leaders are. So that's enough for Cutter. In C tier, definitely not any of these three still. Um, I don't think Chieftain just yet. I'm gonna have to say, probably Prophet of Regret. I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Prophet. Um, I think Prophet because with Forge having his Sun Devils, which are very powerful against air, with the Rebels having their powerful anti-air guns, with Heretic and Flood both being very powerful, and with Anders being able to basically like counter just about everything, just because she has the Hawks that deal with tanks and buildings and infantry. She has the Rhinos that are very effective. She has Gremlins that are very good. She has a lot in her kit. She has a lot in her kit. And then, you got Arbiter with his powerful units. He's got, good elites with jetpacks. He's got, Arbiter's a lot more stacked this time around. He's got a lot more things against air. He's got a lot more things against ground. I feel like Prophet ultimately, since he's really the anti-infantry guy with his honor guards and stuff like that, I feel like he doesn't really stack well against these other leaders. If I had to place him anywhere, it'd have to be probably C tier. Next, so I had to place another person in C tier. So next person would have to be still not any of these three, I would say. Oof, this is tough. Whew. She's Yeah, I think we have to place Forge at C. Now, would he be better than? I think he'd be better than Prophet. Yeah, I think Forge goes there. Chieftain is a very heavily anti-vehicle based character, so you really can't fight him. Anders has Gremlins, freezing with her cryo bomb. She has a lot of things that can really shut Forge's units down. Arbiter has very powerful anti-vehicle units. Heretic and Flood just OP. Rebels have a vehicle that can actually disable other vehicles, like as an AoE. It's very powerful. They also have heavy built-in tanks, which I think are just as, if not more powerful than the Grizzlies. So yeah, ultimately, I think Forge would have to go here. It's kind of crazy to put him there, but if I had to place him anywhere, it'd have to be in C tier against these other leaders. He just doesn't. I just don't think he can compete with the rest of them, just because they do have a lot of anti-vehicle weaponry. They have a very powerful CC, like Anders and Chieftain, and like Flood and Heretic and Rebels are very they're powerhouses. So yeah, ultimately Forge have to go there. Into B tier, probably still none of these three. Who? Ultimately, I think I'd have to place Chieftain at B tier. Brute Chieftain, his biggest problem, he is a very powerful character, no doubt. Like his leader's powerful. He's he's got powerful units. He's one of the his leader is one of the strongest, if not the strongest leader in the game in terms of durability. in terms of DPS. He is a very powerful leader. Chieftain is powerful. But I can't help but think his early game is painful. Brute Chieftain's early game is very painful. I'm not putting early game into too much consideration for this list. However, even against like Anders and stuff, with Anders being able to, she doesn't. I mean, she doesn't have any. There's nothing that can shut infantry down per se, but she does have. She still has a cryo bomb. She still has hawks, which are very powerful. Um, Ultimately, I still think Anders would be able to beat Chieftain just because of the raw amount of power she does have. Uh, it's just how it is. Because those hawks don't mess around. They have an insane DPS. She's got those cryo bombs. She's got rhinos, which would be a huge problem. She could just cryo bomb you, use rhinos in the back, and just blow you to bits. Yeah, like Anders is quite powerful, so I had to place Chieftain probably there. And Arbiter, his leader is very damaging. He's got very powerful units in general with damage. They're like Arbiter's units are all very squishy, but they all do an insane amount of damage. So I had to place Chieftain there mainly because his units are great, but I don't think they're as good as anyone else's. His leader more than makes up for it for the most part, but it takes a while for him to get online. His leader to get online. He needs to get max stars and upgrades in order for him to become like just the juggernaut he is. Which is why I place him there. So next, we would have to decide between Arbiter and Anders, because I still don't think the Rebels go anywhere in B. Anders, I'd have to say, would... Yeah. I think Anders isn't as good as Arbiter. Arbiter is powerful in this mode. He's got if you ever played Arbiter, his elite ultras are powerful. Arbiter himself is already capable of killing air very effectively. And even with Cryo Bomb and Disruptor, like the Disruption Bomb, she can't use that all the time. Arbiter can always use Rage. He can always use Ultras, which even a handful of Ultras can really lay waste to Anders' Hawks. Not to mention that he also has the anti-air Wraith, which is very powerful as well. He's got the elites that can fly. Arbiter is very powerful and would be able to easily counter Anders. And like in general, he has a lot of anti-vehicle too with those ultras. Those ultras are powerful as hell. So now we're at A tier. A tier ultimately would have to be between, I think, it had to be between these three for sure. Well, maybe even him. I think I'm gonna have to place. God, this is tough. I think Rebels goes in A tier. I don't think the Rebels are as powerful as Heretics, Flood, or Arbiter. The Rebels are very powerful for sure, but the one thing they do lack in is air. They don't lack. They lack any form of air units, which is not that big of a deal because they can easily deal with air. However, these other factions can easily destroy their vehicles, because they have rebels have that one thing that can disable vehicles. They also have the powerful tanks, but these three down here are very effective against tanks. The flood is generally powerful against everything. The heretics are powerful against everything. They have the Uber Scarab. They have their Sentinel Beam guys, which are very tanky and very damaging. They have their Suicide Bomber guys, which, granted, they can't get there, but all they have to do, like, because of these guys being able to disable them, but because of the fact that they can send in their infantry, which is way more powerful than their tanks anyway, they kind of counter anything the rebels have. The rebels do have infantry as well, but their infantry is also very weak. They can spam them pretty much, but they are very weak and would not be able to stand against any of these three, especially since the flood can just take them over. So I have to say that the rebels would go below all three of these guys, because Arbor, like I said, is a powerhouse in damage. So same as like the heretics, really. Um, So who would go above the rebels? I would have to say, um, uh, between these three, whoo, buddy, I can't believe I'm actually considering this, but yeah, this might come as a shocker. I actually think Flood goes here. Yeah, I think Flood goes there. Do not get me wrong. The Flood is very, very powerful. Definitely the strongest faction if it gets to late game. It's even a strong early game, but it struggles mid game. The Flood has a tough time getting through mid game only because they have insane economy, but they have a issue converting from mid to late game. And it's because their buildings are so expensive and their troops are also pretty expensive. So in the mid game stage, you're really just ultimately building economy for a long time, researching anything you can because your guys aren't that powerful yet. Um, Once you get to late game, though, they're definitely the strongest faction, I would say, apart from, well, one, which I'll get to in a minute. Um, but yeah, ultimately the mid game is where I would say is the ultimate defeat for the Flood, just because of the fact that they have to really dedicate a lot into economy at the beginning. Not to mention that they also need like I think it's like 4 to 5 bases to get the max population limit for them, which could be quite a problem when dealing with these two leaders here. They're both extremely powerful against bases. Arbiters, Ultras can destroy bases within a few seconds. Heretics are to quite literal counter to Flood. Um, so with the like, if the Flood can get well established, then yeah, they're the most powerful. But when it comes to fighting the Heretics or Arbiter, they can both just quickly run around the map and blow up his bases, leaving the Flood with just a Gravemind. And with only the Gravemind, you don't have your Juggernauts, which are very powerful units. You don't have as much pop, so it can leave you very vulnerable. And as well, if the Heretics do get enough, if they do get far ahead, the Flood, they can definitely beat Arbiter, but they can never beat Heretic. The Heretic is quite literally their ultimate counter. Everything the Heretics do, they do a bonus damage to the Flood. Everything they have has good DPS, high hitting attacks against Flood. And it's ultimately why I think the Flood just goes here, because the Arbiter is just too powerful when it comes to base killing, and these two leaders can easily just shut him down in mid game. And hell, even in early game, if they pull off a successful rush, because they're just that powerful. Their leaders are powerful. Their units are powerful. They have both insane amount of damage, and can easily just isolate the Flood Gravemind. But if, like I said, if the Flood Gravemind does get to the late game stage, they are most definitely S plus plus basically. But yeah, ultimately though, it comes down to just these two being better than them. Arbiter, definitely without a single question, is not as good as the Heretics. And the reason why the Heretics are the number one in my opinion is because they're able to do everything. They have good air. Their leader is powerful, has insane DPS. He has clones that also do damage. His clones do, I think it's like 30% of his damage or something like that. And they do a lot of DPS altogether with all its holograms. They last a while too. They all fly. They can easily divert different targets with all four of them. Like they can definitely, like for Uber units for instance, you can just have the holograms run in front of it or on the side of it and have the Uber unit not ever target the actual heretic. And it's very effective. It's their infantry as heretics is very powerful. The ultra guys for Arbiter are also strong, but the infantry for the heretics easily can counter them because of how tanky and damaging and how much range they actually have. On top of that, even if they couldn't, they have the suicidal tanks that can run into the ultras and ultimately just killing them because they do enough damage to the point that they can't be ignored by the ultras, but they also blow up. So either way, if they ignore them, they're dead. If they shoot at it, they're also dead. So there's no way to really survive those wraith tanks for Arbiter's perspective. Like they really can't do anything against them for their ultras. Their flyers, the Arbiter's flyer guys that he has, would ultimately just get stomped on by anything that Heretic throws. Like I said, his air's good. His leader also flies and has holograms. And Heretic also has the Proto Scarab, which is OP as hell. That's the Proto Scarab is what really just stomps most of these guys. The Proto Scarab does a crud ton of damage. If you get that thing to 2-star or 3-star, that thing is just a absolute Jesus beam of death. And it's just unstoppable. Nothing you can do against it. And the thing is, Heretic also doesn't need engineers. Whereas Arbiter and every other Covenant leader need to build engineers to sustain themselves. He has the healing beam from the UNSC. That he has that he can throw down. He has Flood. He even has the Flood on his side. At least, in a sense. He can throw Flood down. It's not technically on his side, but it turned into, just regular Flood NPCs. And they can just attack anything, even himself. But the best way you utilize this is by putting it on their base and just taking over their troops, and it can spread very quickly. I remember I had an entire army just everywhere, and they would guard my base with just the Flood just guarding the bridge for me, so I didn't have to ever use my own troops. I just kept using Flood to keep taking over the enemy. He also has the Sentinel Enforcers, which are also very tanky and damaging. The Sentinels specifically counter the Flood. You saw in my Forge video where I fought a 1v3 against Flood. I ultimately won because of Sentinels. The Mongoose would have helped me too, but The Sentinels is what ultimately won me the game because they fly, they do a lot of damage, they do bonus damage to Flood. I think it seems like it at least because even the tank floors get drained very quickly to the Flood. Or the Sentinel, sorry. The Sentinels, yeah, Heretic all around is probably the best because he has it all. He has it all. He even has modified locusts that do a lot of damage to everything. I mean, like except for infantry, of course. But they do a lot of damage to air. They do a lot of damage to ground. They do a lot of damage to just like ground vehicles. I mean, and their base killers on their initial attacks. So yeah, I mean, like I said, the Heretic is ultimately the best because they have everything. They have the UNSC power that powers to heal themselves. They have the Forerunners flyers. They have the Covenants vehicles, and they have their own uh, infantry, which is very powerful. The Heretics definitely are the strongest because like they just have it all. They have insane damage. They have good tanks. Their infantry is very tanky. Their air is pretty tanky. Their Scarab, it's not tanky, but it does a shit ton of damage. And that's ultimately why he is the best. So yeah, that is the tier list. For this. Now, if I were to place where I believe everyone actually belongs, like instead of like limiting myself to two. Like this is ultimately where I think everyone belongs. If I had to place only two people at each tier. However, in reality though, because of how balanced everything is, I would have to say, this is how I actually see it. So, um, I would actually move Anders up. I think she's just as powerful, pretty much on par with these two others right here because of how much CC and how many weapons she has. She has good range. She's got good yeah. She's just a CC queen. She has the cryo bomb, gremlin. She's got the rhinos now. They don't CC, but they have insane damage and range. I would still leave Chieftain here. I don't think he's as powerful quite there as these three. But I would move Forge up. I would move Prophet up because I think he's pretty on par with these two. And then I would move Captain Cutter up here. Actually, I moved Captain Cutter up here to be honest. And then I would still leave the Grunt Rebellion there though. That's how I actually. Oh, actually, there is one thing else. There's one other thing too. Flood, because of the late game. I ultimately do think the Flood is still S tier. I don't think the Rebels are, or Anders even, but I think the Flood definitely makes its way up to the S plus tier just because of the late game. The late game is just once they get to late game, you can't kill them. Once they get the Abomination up, once they get Juggernauts up, you can't kill them. You can't win. They're too tanky at that point. They're too strong. If they have 5 bases, they're just unkillable. And they have like at that point they have like hundreds of thousands of troops. Pretty much it seems like, because of all the infection forms that cost like nothing. Because not only do they have 150 pop, but there's a lot of units for the Flood that don't even go. Like they don't even go towards that pop limit. The Juggernauts don't go to that pop limit. The infection forms, you can build infection forms from your base. They don't go to the pop limit. They have their own, thing. So really, in reality, you're fighting over like 205 troops basically. At that point, you're just screwed. No matter how much you have, you're just screwed. It doesn't matter what you have at that point. But yeah, look at this tier list. This is ultimately where I'd have it. Like I said, the Grunt Rebellion though, that's where I would leave them. But it's just because I do see them as situational. I think they are the worst leader in the game for sure. And it's mainly just because their early game and mid game, they're only good late game. I think I've never really done that great with them early or mid. It's mainly just when they get the late game that they're just insane. If we were talking late game, I would say he's like right here, honestly. It like going left to right from strongest to weakest or whatever. I'd say he would be like right. Well, hell, actually, yeah. I would say in late game he would be like right there. In late game, that's where he would be. He would be behind the flood. And hell, if you have a friend with you and you do the Mega Turret exploit, he's even better than the flood. And if you don't know what the Mega Turret exploit is, basically you garrison your um you garrison your Mega Turrets. You can upgrade them to be able to be garrisoned. But the thing is, you don't put your guys in them. You have your friend put a guy in there. And what that does is it allows you to build another Mega Turret. Because you technically don't have one anymore. Because your friend has your Mega Turret under his guy's thing. So technically it's his turret now. But he has no control of it. But you still have control as long as you have a Mega Turret up. So what I'm getting at is you can actually have two Mega Turrets. And if you keep doing it over and over and over again, you can have infinite amount of Mega Turrets. And if you get the magic number, which I think it's like 5 or 6, you can tell all 5 Mega Turrets to shoot one base, and it literally blows up the base instantly. Grunt Rebellion in late game is definitely the most powerful, just because being able to take out bases like that is the most OP thing in the game for sure. Not even the Abomination can take out bases that fast, because you can just build as many Mega Turrets as you want, and if you have like let's just say you go to late game, you have 20 Mega Turrets and theoretically wipe out every single base like that, just like that, because it only takes 5 Mega Turrets or something like that to blow up a base, and if you have 20 of them, you can take out 4 bases like that. So it's quite crazy. That late, if you talk about super late game, he would be there. But that's about all I have to say about this. Again, for if you're wondering again, this was the original of what I was, the two people basically. I think it was. Was it this? No. It was. I think that's about right. I think. Is that right? I think it's about right, yeah. Um that's about how I had it. But yeah, that's what I would say is like the best. That's what best to worst basically. Uh but yeah, if you have any if you have any questions, or if you want to talk about like what you think is the best or worst, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys for today. This is the legendary Founding Titan signing off. Peace.